I'm Eleanor Mayfield, once a devoted wife, a dreamy artist, and a mother who had no choice but to run into a storm when the man I loved dropped to his knees at his own wedding to another woman. All because I chose to keep the two little lives his family wanted erased from this world. I disappeared for 8 years, but the truth, like my children, always finds its way back. Before I share this story of heartbreak and courage, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever fought through adversity for your family, hit like and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened when I walked into that cathedral. The morning I planned to tell Caleb about the baby, New Orleans wrapped us in golden light like a blessing. I woke in his arms, my artist's eye catching how the sun painted shadows across his jawline. And for a moment, I just watched him breathe. 1 year married, 1 year since this brilliant lawyer had chosen my paint-stained fingers over manicured ones that reached for him at every charity gala. "Stop staring," he murmured without opening his eyes, pulling me closer. "It's creepy. It's romantic," I corrected, pressing my palm against his chest where his heartbeat lived. "Besides, I'm memorizing you for a painting." "Another one? Eleanor, our apartment already looks like a Caleb Whitmore museum." Our apartment. Not his family's Garden District mansion, not some sleek downtown loft. Our converted artist studio in the French Quarter, where canvases leaned against exposed brick and morning coffee came with jazz from the street below. "Happy anniversary," I whispered, and almost added, "and something else." But his mother's face flashed through my mind. Strange how Rosalind Whitmore could invade even this perfect moment. Happy anniversary." His lips found my neck. "What time is the reservation?" 8, Brennan's. "Fancy. Should I be worried about our savings?" I laughed. "Your mother's paying." He stilled. Just for a second, but I felt it. That tension that came with any mention of Rosalind. "She is?" She insisted. "Called it an anniversary gift." I tried to keep my voice light. Said she wanted to, what was it? Properly celebrate her son's choice. The way she'd said choice had made it sound like a mistake he'd eventually correct. But I pushed that thought away. Pregnancy hormones, probably. Making me oversensitive to every loaded glance, every pause before she called me dear. Caleb rolled me beneath him, his lawyer face on now, all sharp focus and determination. "Hey, you know I love you, right? That nothing she says or does changes that?" I know, and I did, mostly. But that night at Brennan's, sitting across from Rosalind's Arctic smile, I felt our baby flutter for the first time. Like butterfly wings or fear, I couldn't tell which. She'd ordered for the table. Oysters I couldn't eat, wine I couldn't drink. And when I'd pushed both aside, her eyes had narrowed. "Not feeling well, Eleanor? You look different." "Just tired. I've been working on a new series for the Children's Hospital." "How charitable." She sipped her wine, diamond earrings catching the light like ice. "Though I suppose with Caleb supporting you, you can afford to work for free." "Mom," Caleb's warning was soft but clear. "What? I'm simply observing. When I was Eleanor's age, I'd already built my first company." "But then we can't all be entrepreneurs, can we? Someone has to paint pictures." The baby fluttered again. I pressed my hand to my stomach under the table, a protective gesture I'd repeat 1,000 times in the coming months. Caleb took my other hand, squeezed it, but Rosalind saw. Of course she saw. Her smile widened. The first painting that got destroyed was one of my favorites, a piece I'd done of Caleb sleeping, all soft lines and vulnerable peace. I found it on our bedroom floor 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner, canvas slashed in neat, deliberate lines. "Maybe it fell," Caleb suggested, though we both knew paintings didn't fall and shred themselves. "The frame was loose. You mentioned that last week." I hadn't mentioned anything. But arguing seemed pointless when he was already grabbing his briefcase, already half gone to a world of depositions and billable hours. A world where his mother had started appearing more often, bringing him lunch, sitting in on meetings. "Just checking on my investment," she'd say, and partners would laugh because Rosalind Whitmore's money talked louder than any junior partner's wife's concerns. The second incident was smaller, but somehow worse. My grandmother's letters, the ones she'd written me before she died, full of recipes and prayers and Croatian endearments, disappeared from my jewelry box. In their place sat a self-help book, Managing Anxiety in Marriage. I didn't put this here, I told Caleb that night. He glanced at it, distracted. Maybe Maria, our housekeeper. You know she's always trying to organize things. But Maria hadn't worked that day. I'd checked. The baby made itself known more strongly now, rolling and kicking, especially when I was upset, which was often. Small things kept happening. My easel moved so I'd trip, important commissions lost in the mail, my morning sickness tea replaced with something that made me violently ill. You're paranoid, Caleb said after I suggested we change the locks. Mom has a key for emergencies. She's not sneaking in to move your paintbrushes, Eleanor. Listen to yourself. So I stopped talking, started watching instead, started noticing how our doorman suddenly had Pelicans season tickets, how our mail sometimes looked pre-sorted, how Rosalind always knew things she shouldn't, what I'd eaten for breakfast, which doctors I'd seen. Only Noah noticed. The gardener she'd hired to maintain the courtyard planters, barely 22, with kind eyes and dirt under his nails. He'd bring me herbs from his own garden, real morning sickness remedies, not whatever poison I'd been drinking. Mrs. Whitmore, he said one afternoon, finding me crying over another destroyed canvas. This ain't right. Whatever's happening here, it ain't right. It's the pregnancy, I lied. Hormones. But he looked at my slashed painting, at the precision of those cuts, and shook his head. That ain't hormones. That's something else. Please don't say anything. To anyone. You need help. I need to protect my baby. The words came out fierce, primal. That's all that matters now. He nodded slowly, understanding something I hadn't even admitted to myself yet. That I was already at war. That I was already losing. The gaslighting started subtle, like everything Rosalind did. First, she convinced Caleb I'd been calling his office repeatedly during meetings. 17 times yesterday, he said, exhausted, loosening his tie in our bedroom. My secretary's threatening to quit. I called once to remind you about the ultrasound, which he'd missed. Again. Eleanor, she has a log. 17 calls between noon and 3. I stared at him. I was painting at the community center from noon to 4. Check with Sister Mary Catherine. But he didn't check. Why would he? His mother had already explained about pregnancy paranoia, about women who became difficult when hormonal. She'd sent articles, studies, testimonials from other daughters-in-law who'd needed help. The next week, I allegedly sent rambling emails to his colleagues about conspiracy theories. Emails I'd never written from accounts I'd never created. But there they were, complete with my name and photos pulled from my website. We need to get you help, Caleb said after his boss called him in for a meeting about the situation at home. I need you to believe me. Someone is doing what? Framing you? Who would do that, Eleanor? Why would anyone care that much about us? Your mother, I wanted to scream. Your mother who commented last Christmas that Whitmore men had a history of marrying down that needed correcting. Your mother who kept your ex-girlfriend's photo on her mantle. Your mother who looked at my growing belly like it personally offended her. But I stayed silent because pregnant women who accused their mothers-in-law of elaborate sabotage didn't sound stable. They sounded exactly like what Rosalind was painting me as. Delusional, dangerous, in need of intervention. The crescendo came the night I found Caleb's pillow soaked in what looked like blood. He was at another late meeting and I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from carrying twins. News I'd just learned and hadn't shared yet. But there it was, a pillow drenched in red, though when I touched it, it was only dye. Only fake, only meant to terrify. I called Caleb, hands shaking. He didn't answer. Called again. Nothing. But Rosalind answered her phone on the first ring. Eleanor, dear, having another episode? You were here, in my home. I'm at the symphony with the Henrys. Hundreds of witnesses. Are you feeling well? You sound agitated. Stay away from us. Us? Her laugh tinkled like breaking glass. Oh dear, having delusions of persecution is serious. Has Caleb mentioned the wonderful facility in Mandeville? Dr. Brenner specializes in prenatal psychosis. I hung up, packed a bag. But where could a pregnant woman go at midnight that wouldn't make her look more unstable? So I stayed, cleaned up the dye, threw out the pillow, pretended to sleep when Caleb came home at 2 a.m., smelling like his mother's perfume because she'd stopped by the office with takeout. Just worried about you both, she'd told him. Eleanor called earlier. She sounded confused. The trap was perfect. Every move I made to protect myself looked like madness. Every truth I told sounded like lies. And my babies rolled inside me, innocent of the war being waged over their future. The intervention was held on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd been planning to tell Caleb about the twins that night, had practiced the words in front of my destroyed paintings, hands on my belly, trying to imagine his joy. Instead, I walked into our apartment to find him there with his mother, someone called Dr. Brenner, and two men in medical uniforms. "Sweetheart," Caleb started, and I saw it all in his eyes. The doubt she'd planted, the fear she'd nurtured, the love she'd twisted into something that looked like concern but felt like betrayal. 30 days, Dr. Branner said smoothly. Voluntary admission, rest, proper medication oversight, and you'll be home before the baby comes. Babies, I said quietly. Twins. Something flickered in Caleb's face. Surprise, maybe joy, but Rosalind's hand on his arm killed it. All the more reason to get help, she said. Think of the strain, the pressure. You're already showing signs of being terrorized. The words exploded out. By you. Every destroyed painting, every moved object, every fake email, eh? Eleanor. Caleb's voice broke. Please, Mom's been nothing but worried. She hired extra security after you mentioned intruders. She's been checking on you because I asked her to. The men stepped forward. I stepped back. I won't go. Then we'll have to proceed with involuntary, Dr. Brenner began. No. Noah appeared in our doorway like salvation in work boots. She ain't going nowhere. She don't want to. Who is this? Rosalind's voice could have frozen hell. Someone who's been watching, Noah said simply. Seeing things, like you letting yourself in with that key, like you going through her mail. Got pictures if anyone wants to see. The room went still. Caleb looked between his mother and Noah, and for one moment I thought, hoped. You're fired, Rosalind said coldly. And if you don't leave immediately, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and stalking. Caleb, I reached for my husband. Please, the babies, our babies. He wavered. I saw it. But 8 years of conditioning versus 8 months of marriage wasn't a fair fight. The facility is nice, he said finally. I've seen it, just for a month, just until I ran, out the door, past the men who grabbed for me, down 3 flights of stairs with Noah behind me shouting directions to his truck. Rosalind's voice echoed through the stairwell. Let her go. She'll come back when she realizes what she's losing. But I didn't go back. Not when contractions started 2 hours later, speeding toward Portland in Noah's ancient pickup, not when the rain turned roads to rivers and Noah to my unlikely midwife, pulling over to deliver my sons on the side of Highway 10 while lightning split the sky. Push, he kept saying. You're stronger than you know. Aiden came first, screaming and perfect. Theo followed, quiet but breathing. And I became a mother on a roadside, in a storm, with a near stranger holding my hand and my husband 50 miles behind, probably signing papers to commit me. They're beautiful, Noah whispered, wrapping them in his jacket. Got their mama's fight. I looked at my boys, our boys, mine and Caleb's, though he'd never know, and felt my heart restructure itself around them. Whatever Eleanor I'd been died in that truck. The mother born in her place was fiercer, focused on only one truth. These children would never know a grandmother's poison or a father's weakness. Drive, I told Noah. Just drive. Portland welcomed us like a secret kept. Noah's cousin owned apartments near Powell's Books, asked no questions about a woman with newborn twins and no ring. The divorce papers found me anyway. Rosalind's lawyers were thorough, along with a custody arrangement that gave me full rights in exchange for never contacting Caleb again. I signed everything. What else could I do? Fight the Whitmore fortune with paintbrushes and principle? Drag my boys through courts that would scrutinize my breakdown, my kidnapping of my own children, my instability? No, we disappeared instead. The bookshop came third year, after I'd built enough of a reputation illustrating children's books to afford rent on Mississippi Avenue. Once upon a canvas, painted in letters that curved like smoke, specialized in picture books and art supplies. The boys grew between the shelves, Aiden loud and fearless, Theo watchful and wise. Tell us about Dad, they'd ask sometimes, usually at bedtime when defenses were down. He loved you before you were born. I'd say, which was true. He just couldn't be with us. Why? Sometimes love isn't enough to make people brave. Noah stayed, not in our lives exactly, but near them. He opened a landscaping business, hired kids from the neighborhood, and showed up Sunday dinners with flowers and vegetables from his garden. He never pushed, never asked for more than I could give, which was friendship and trust and maybe something else I wasn't ready to name. "You still paint him?" he observed once, finding canvas after canvas of Caleb hidden in my studio closet. "I paint memories. It's different." "Is it?" The boys were 5 when they found the wedding album I'd hidden. They studied their father's face with the intensity of archaeologists discovering artifacts. "He looks like us," Theo said solemnly. "We look like him," Aiden corrected. "He came first." They started seeing Caleb everywhere after that. In tall men at the grocery store, in lawyers on TV, in every dark-haired stranger who smiled at them. I'd catch them practicing facial expressions in mirrors, trying to match the ones in the photos. Meanwhile, 800 miles away, Caleb was building the life his mother wanted. I knew because Noah had a cousin in New Orleans who sent updates I claimed not to want. Caleb made partner early, dated appropriately, attended galas solo. And Rosalind? She'd developed what they politely called memory issues, forgetting which lies were real and which truths she'd buried. "Karma," Noah said simply. But I felt no satisfaction. Just sadness for the grandmother my boys would never know, even the poisoned version. For the father choosing emptiness over them. For the family we'd almost been before fear dressed up as love destroyed it. Year 7, Theo asked the question I'd been dreading. Did Dad not want us? We were making cookies for the school bake sale, flour everywhere, and his small voice stopped my hands mid-mix. "He never knew you," I said carefully. "Things happened that you can just say yes." Aiden appeared in the doorway, 8 years old and already protecting his brother. "We're not babies." "He wanted you," I said firmly. "But sometimes adults make things complicated that should be simple." "Like how Noah wants to be our dad but won't say so?" Aiden asked. Kids, they saw everything. The invitation arrived on cream cardstock so thick it felt like armor. Rosalind's handwriting had deteriorated. Spidery now, uncertain, but the message was clear. "Mr. Caleb Alexander Whitmore and Miss Amelia Catherine Carrington request your presence at their wedding." Attached. A sticky note in that same shaky hand. "Hope you see what a worthy life looks like for my son." I might have thrown it away. Should have. But Aiden had grabbed the mail that day, and boys who'd inherited their father's sharp eyes noticed everything. "Whitmore," he read slowly. "That's Dad's name." "Let me see." Theo took the invitation with careful hands, the way he touched breakable things. "He's getting married?" "Seems so." "In Charleston." Aiden was already pulling up maps on my phone. "That's only, wow, really far." "We're not going," I said quickly. "Why not?" "Because your grandmother orchestrated my destruction. Because your father chose believing lies over protecting truth. Because some wounds shouldn't be reopened." "It would be complicated," I said instead. "You always say complicated things are just simple things with extra steps," Theo pointed out, using my own words against me like the lawyer's son he was. They researched obsessively after that. Found Caleb's firm bio, his charity work, the society photos where he stood beside beautiful women but never touched them. Found Amelia, too. Local news anchor, daughter of senators, everything Rosalind had wanted in a daughter-in-law. "She looks mean," Aiden decided. "She looks sad," Theo corrected. And I saw what he saw. The practiced smile that never reached her eyes, the way she held herself apart even in crowds. Noah found me crying over the invitation 3 nights later. Boys asleep, defenses down. "You're going," he said. Not a question. "I can't." "They deserve to know where they came from." "They came from me, that's enough." He sat beside me, solid and sure the way he'd been since that night on Highway 10. "Is it? Because they've been asking me to teach them to throw a football like dads do. They watch other kids at father-son camp and pretend they don't care." Caleb made his choice. 8 years ago, when his mother was pulling strings and you were running scared? What would he choose now? "It doesn't matter, doesn't it?" Noah took my paint-stained hands in his calloused ones. "I've loved you since the day you named your boys in my truck. Loved them since they took their first breaths. But I'm not their father, and pretending I could be is just another lie. I never asked you to. I know. You never ask anyone for anything. But maybe it's time to stop protecting everyone from the truth. The boys campaigned relentlessly, researched Charleston, made PowerPoints about educational opportunities, promised to be so good if I'd just consider it. We don't want to ruin his wedding, Theo assured me solemnly. We just want to see him, just once. From far away, Aiden added. He doesn't even have to know. But I knew better. Knew that Whitmore eyes in miniature would be impossible to miss. Knew that Rosalind, even diminished, would recognize the ghosts I'd raised. If we go, I said finally, we go with truth. No hiding, no pretending, no lies. They nodded, solemn as judges. And if it hurts? We're tough, Aiden said. We're yours, Theo added, which wasn't the same thing but mattered more. Charleston in June was all genteel suffocation and blooming magnolias. We stayed at a small inn near the water, boys wide-eyed at architecture that predated their entire existence. I'd dressed them carefully, not to impress, but to armor them in respectability. Navy suits that made them look older, shoes that clicked authority on cobblestones. Remember, I said outside the church, hands shaking as I smoothed their lapels. We can leave any time. We know, they said together. My brave soldiers marching into someone else's war. The cathedral was everything Rosalind would have chosen. Soaring and cold, filled with people who wore wealth like birthright. We slipped in as the processional began, finding seats in the back, and I saw him immediately. 8 years had refined Caleb into something harder. Same face but carved now from disappointment, standing at the altar like a man attending his own funeral. When the music swelled and Amelia appeared, gorgeous, appropriate, empty, he smiled the way he'd smiled at depositions. Professionally, pointlessly. Is that, Aiden whispered. Shh. But Theo was already standing, pulled by invisible strings toward the father he'd imagined 1,000 times. I grabbed for him, missed, and watched my quiet son walk down that aisle like he belonged there. Stop, I whispered. But physics and desperate motherhood couldn't compete with a boy's need to know his father. The congregation turned, murmured. Amelia paused mid-step, confusion cracking her perfect mask. And Caleb went absolutely still. Daddy? Aiden had followed his brother. Of course he had. And his voice carried in that stone chamber like truth in a courtroom. The word destroyed everything. Caleb's knees hit marble. Just dropped, like someone had cut his strings. His hands reached out, shaking, and I saw the exact moment he did the math. Their age, their eyes, their faces that were his face, softened by youth and my love. Oh God, he breathed. Oh my God. Rosalind rose from her front pew perch, wobbling on designer heels. What is the meaning, Eleanor? She said my name like summoning a demon. But the woman who'd terrorized me was smaller now, confused, her careful plans unraveling in her addled mind. You said she was gone. Caleb turned on his mother, still on his knees. You said she took the baby and disappeared. You said, babies, Rosalind corrected absently. Twins, so unfortunate. But I saved you, didn't I? From her episodes? Her instability? I forget exactly, but I saved you. The cathedral erupted. Amelia threw her bouquet at Caleb's head, lilies exploding like small grenades. Senators' daughters didn't do public humiliation well. Guests filmed everything on phones, society scandal in real time. But in our small bubble, none of that mattered. Are you our dad? Theo asked, scientist seeking confirmation. Yes, Caleb choked out. God, yes, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Mom said you loved us before we were born, Aiden challenged, protective even now. I do. Eleanor, please. He was crying. This man who'd presented closing arguments to the Supreme Court was sobbing on his knees, reaching for boys who looked like echoes of his better self. I stepped forward finally, Mother Lioness claiming her cubs. But when I looked at him, really looked, I saw not the man who'd failed us, but the boy who'd painted by candlelight with me. Who'd chosen love over logic, until his mother made that impossible. They needed to know you existed, I said simply. That's all this is. All? He stood shakily, hand still reaching. Eleanor, I've been dead for 8 years. Mom told me you were gone, that you'd had a breakdown, taken the baby, that finding you would traumatize you more. I signed papers to protect you, to give you space to heal. I never knew. Twins? Aiden, my brave boy said, stepping forward to shake his father's hand like a tiny businessman. I'm older by 6 minutes. Theo, his brother added, hanging back but watching everything. You named them, Caleb said to me, wonder in his voice. You gave them family names. His grandfather and mine. The history we'd planned to honor before history repeated itself in uglier ways. Rosalind swayed, grabbed a pew for support. This isn't right. The timeline's wrong. Eleanor was sick. The doctor said, What did the doctor say? You paid him to say it, I said quietly. Just like you paid the doorman to report on me. The mail carrier to give you my letters. The orchestrated everything. Noah's voice came from behind us. He'd insisted on coming, on being backup I hadn't known I'd need. Got proof if anyone wants to see it. 8 years of proof. Caleb looked between Noah and me, understanding dawning. You saved them. She saved herself, Noah corrected. I just drove the truck. The wedding, needless to say, didn't happen. Amelia left in a storm of tulle and threats while guests scattered like startled birds. But in the church's garden, under a canopy of wisteria, our strange family gathered for the first time. Rosalind sat on a stone bench, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The confusion that had been creeping for years had fully arrived, leaving her stranded between who she'd been and who she was becoming. I wanted what was best, she kept saying. The Whitmore name, the legacy. Did I do something wrong? I can't remember if I did something wrong. You did, Caleb said quietly. But there was pity in it now. This woman who'd orchestrated such careful destruction couldn't even remember her victories. The boy studied her like a science experiment. She's our grandmother? Theo asked. Biologically, I said. She hurt you, Aiden stated. Nice. Not asking. She was afraid, I said, finding truth in it. Fear makes people do terrible things sometimes. We spent 3 days in Charleston. Not in the grand hotel Rosalind had booked for wedding guests, but in our little inn, establishing tentative rhythms. Caleb came for breakfast, took the boys to Fort Sumter, taught them to skip stones in the harbor while I watched from safe distances. I want to know everything, he said the second night. Boys asleep between us on a picnic blanket. First words, first steps, every fever, every nightmare, every joy I missed. So I told him. 8 years condensed into hours, photos shared from phones, videos of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and Aiden's first bloody nose and Theo's first science fair win. They're incredible, he kept saying. You did this. You made them incredible. They made themselves incredible. With your love, your strength, your... God, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I know. Do you forgive me? I thought about it. Really thought about it while our sons breathed between us like bridges we were still learning to cross. I forgive the boy who loved me, I said finally. The man who failed us, that's harder. What if I earned it? This isn't about us anymore, it's about them. He nodded, understanding. But his hand found mine across our sleeping children, and I let it stay. Noah waited in Portland, patient as earth. He'd kissed me goodbye at the airport. First time in 8 years, and tasted like possibility I wasn't ready for. Figure out what needs figuring, he'd said. I'll be here either way. The boys wanted everything, of course. Their father in Portland. Christmases together. A do-over of 8 years of absence. And Caleb, desperate to give them anything, would have agreed to live in our coat closet if they'd asked. But what do you want? He asked me the last night. Boys showing Rosalind videos of their soccer team while she smiled vaguely at these strangers she'd helped create. I want them happy. That's not what I asked. I looked at him. Really looked. Saw the boy who'd chosen me despite everything. The man who'd believed lies because believing truth would have meant his mother was monster, not savior. The father discovering his children like unwrapping miracles. I want to paint again, I said. Really paint. Not just illustrations, but the messy, complicated truth of things. So paint. I want them to have you without losing themselves in your world. Then we build new worlds. I stopped, uncertain. What? I want to stop being afraid. Of you. Of her, of trusting, of letting Noah love me the way he's been trying to, of letting you back in my life without losing myself again. He absorbed that. Lawyer still, but man learning. What if we started small? He said finally. Visits, shared custody, me coming to Portland instead of dragging you back to New Orleans. What if we just tried? And Rosalind? We looked at his mother, who was teaching Theo a clapping game she'd probably taught Caleb 40 years ago. The poison diluted now by confusion. The careful cruelty lost to failing synapses. She goes to memory care, he said quietly, where she can't hurt anyone, where maybe sometimes the boys could visit the grandmother she might have been. And us? We co-parent, we heal, we see what grows in honest ground. I thought about Noah's patient hands, about Caleb's familiar eyes, about hearts big enough for complicated loves and truths that didn't require choosing sides. Okay, I said, we try. 6 months later, I stood in my Portland studio, adding final touches to the painting that would anchor my new exhibition. The Mother in the Mirror, a self-portrait where past and present Eleanor looked back at each other, one holding babies, one holding brushes, both holding truths that had taken years to reconcile. It's beautiful, Caleb said from the doorway. He visited monthly now, staying in the guest room, building relationships with boys who were learning to trust their father in small doses. It's honest, I corrected. Same thing, maybe. Noah was in the garden with the boys, teaching them to plant winter vegetables. Through the window, I could see Aiden gesturing wildly while Theo measured soil pH and Noah's patient smile encompassing them both. He's good with them, Caleb observed, no jealousy in it anymore. He's good with all of us. We'd found our rhythm, strange as it was. Caleb in their lives, but not our home. Noah in our home, but not overstepping bounds. Me painting again, really painting. The messy, complicated truth of families that didn't fit neat categories. Mom remembered you yesterday, Caleb said quietly. Just for a moment. Asked if I'd brought you flowers like she taught me. Did she teach you that? No, but maybe she wishes she had. The boys burst in then, dirty and laughing, dragging both men into some argument about whether tomatoes were fruits or vegetables. I watched them, my complicated, extended, beautifully imperfect family, and thought about the woman I'd been 8 years ago. Scared, alone, sure that love meant choosing one person forever. Now I knew better. Love was bigger than that, messier, more generous. Mom, tell them tomatoes are obviously vegetables, Aiden demanded. They're fruit, Theo insisted, scientifically proven. They're both, I said, depending on who's asking and why. Like forgiveness, like family. Like the mother in the mirror who'd learned that sometimes the only way forward was to stop looking back. That night, after bedtime stories and goodnight kisses from their father, after tea with Noah on the porch, and plans made for tomorrow's adventures, I returned to my studio. The exhibition opened next week. Critics were already circling, intrigued by the mysterious Eleanor Mayfield returning after 8 years of silence. But I didn't paint for them anymore. I painted for the woman who'd rebuilt herself roadside in a storm. For the boys who'd inherited their father's eyes but their mother's steel. For the complicated love that encompassed 2 good men and 1 recovering mother-in-law, and the grace to let it all exist without keeping score. The last painting in the series showed all of us at dinner, Caleb and Noah debating something while the boys laughed, me watching with eyes that had learned to see beauty in the broken places. I'd titled it, After the Storm, because that's what we were. Not the fairy tale I'd imagined at 25, not the tragedy Rosalind had orchestrated, just people who'd survived our own hurricanes and chosen to plant gardens in the wreckage. Imperfect, complicated, free. And if sometimes I still dreamed of that morning in New Orleans, waking in Caleb's arms with our whole life ahead of us, I also remembered this. The mother in the mirror had traveled miles that girl couldn't imagine. Had loved deeper, forgiven harder, painted truer than any version who'd never been broken. She was worth the journey. We all were. In the painting, past Eleanor watches present Eleanor with something like awe. As if she's thinking what I think whenever my boys laugh. Look what grew from that dark soil. Look what beauty came from that pain. Look what love looks like when it stops demanding perfection and starts embracing truth.